Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back, dear learners, to this NPTEL course on low cost building materials and techniques. My name is Dr. Vishal Chettry and I am working as an assistant professor in the Department of Architecture, Planning and Design at IIT BHU Varanasi. Today in this particular lecture we will focus on understanding about vernacular architecture and also understand how is it relevant in context of designing a low cost building. Specifically, we will try to focus on certain climatic zones and understand the relevant vernacular architecture practices that are prevailing in specific climatic regions. So, we will understand these in detail in today's presentation. The content of this presentation will include an introduction to vernacular architecture, that is we will be discussing about vernacular architecture as in why is it, what it is actually all about, and in context to low cost building how is it related to to solve or to come up with some solutions for low cost building. Then we will understand some climatic responsive design principles which are based on the local climatic zones, and also we will specifically understand cold and cloudy climatic region, the vernacular architecture practices that are prevailing in this region, and some passive heating or cooling techniques depending on the requirement in specific climatic region. So, we will start with cold and cloudy climatic region, then we will focus on cold and sunny climatic region, and then the moderate climate or climatic region also. Thereafter, we will understand the relevance of all these different low cost techniques in terms of low cost sustainable housing practices. Then we will conclude the presentation along with some wrap up activities, topics that will be covered in the next presentation. Along with that, I will share some of the references which you can explore further to understand about vernacular architecture and climate responsive design principles. So, to give you a glimpse of what we have covered in our in the previous presentation, we tried to explain you about the importance of cost reduction techniques in achieving affordable and efficient construction in terms of its overall importance, that how the cost reduction techniques actually saves the time and money while designing a building. So, all these different techniques were understood along with some examples for low cost roofing, low cost construction of walls or doors and windows and other for other building elements. Then we focused on the importance of rat trap bond masonry, and also we understood how this particular technique reduces the material use while it improves the thermal performance of the material. Then we also explored the benefit of precast RC units, that is prefabricated or precast units that are manufactured in industry, and how it helps in saving time, labor and the overall project cost. So, all these were covered in the previous presentation. Along with that, we also understood the role of prefabricated components and panels in enhancing speed and quality of construction. We also examined low cost roofing systems like plywood formwork, lightweight panels for economical solutions where we want to go ahead with quick construction. For example, if any area is affected by disasters, so over there how such quick construction techniques can provide relief and can help those people who are in distress, or right now they may not be having a shelter for their own. So, these are some quick techniques in some affordable prices which would help these people who want such quick solutions. Also, we understood how different techniques and planning and execution of projects overall it leads to sustainable development as well as some cost effective construction techniques also. So, all these was covered in the previous presentation, and if you have any question or if you are not able to recollect all these points, you can go back to the previous presentation and understand these in detail. So, now with this particular context, it is time for you to understand how vernacular architecture can be helpful in designing a low cost building. So, is there any connection between vernacular architecture and that with the low cost building design, or with the different passive and passive techniques which may be for heating or which may be for cooling of a space that can minimize the usage of active energy, and thereby we reduce the cost of construction. So, all this will be covered in this and the next presentation in detail. So, to start with a basic detail about vernacular architecture. So, in India, vernacular architecture is something that we see in a specific region, and along with some of the inherent characteristics of building of overall architectural style that is present in that region. And so that is why it is called it is a traditional way of designing a building in a particular region. So, it is a region specific construction which is developed by local communities using local materials and techniques. So, as such, when the vernacular architecture was flourishing, so there was no such building professionals who would build these kind of buildings. So, it is mostly artisans, mostly craftsmen, and mostly people who are involved in designing specific architectural style of that building were involved in the construction. So, it was it is generally not designed by any trained professional like architects or civil engineers for this kind of construction. So, it is an age old way of designing a building in a specific region, because every region in India has some difference in the climate, in the weather, and even in the cultural tradition. So, all these is reflected in the architectural style of all the regions. So, if you see a traditional residence or a traditional building somewhere in Gujarat may not be very similar to what we see in Karnataka, or in somewhere in Odisha, or in Bihar, or somewhere in northeast also. So, this is where these differences are present, specifically pertaining to the architectural style with respect to the availability of material, also with respect to the construction technique that is prevalent in that region, mostly due to the climate and due to the availability of these local materials. So, these are the two factors which are very much part of a vernacular architecture. So, the first is the availability of local material, and second is the role of the local climate in or the local specifically local climate in that particular region. So, a house which is supposed to provide more comfortable space in northern in cold and cloudy region like somewhere in Shimla or somewhere in Manali may not be required in Nagpur or in Delhi because of the difference in climatic region. So, also the availability of material is a question, but mostly it is the climate that is considered while designing a building in a specific region. So, that is what differentiates the architectural style of every region, and this is what is a vernacular architecture. So, to define a vernacular architecture, it refers to the traditional building styles developed by local communities using locally available material and climatic knowledge. So, this is the definition of vernacular architecture, and the response to local environment, like these buildings are adapted to local climate and geography, often reducing indoor temperature variations by 3 to 5 degree Celsius compared to poorly designed buildings or any other contemporary building. So this is what because of this age old tradition of construction, so there has been multiple multiple attempts in enhancing the thermal comfort inside such spaces, inside these buildings. So this has been an trial and error method that has developed over a period of time. So there may be many attempts of designing a building, and then possibly somewhere after 100, 200 or 400 years we have evolved, and then the design has evolved in the particular region, and certain specific elements have been brought up or have been formulated for each region, which provides a specific comfort level in the region. So this has been practiced from generations, and still now you can find such traditional houses being built in every region, and these are very unique, that these cannot be repeated, or these building styles cannot be designed in another climatic region because of the difference in climatic region. Then the major characteristic of these buildings are that they use local materials. As I was explaining you before, the availability of material in a region has a lot has a lot in terms of the climate, the climatic region overall, the geology of that region. So any material that is available in a specific region has to do something with the climate of that region. So that is why if we use that material, so there is a strong correlation between the availability of material in that region with that of the building material, with that of the climate. So accordingly these styles differ from region to region. Then the materials such as mud, stone, bamboo, timber and thatch are commonly used, making construction affordable and sustainable. So these are some material based on the region, we use them for construction, and then overall the sustainability is also increased. Overall the community knowledge and tradition is key way of communicating this design idea from one generation to another. So construction techniques are passed down through generations, and it reflects the local skills and lifestyles of the individuals. Further, in terms of energy efficiency, vernacular buildings rely on passive design strategies. So what is passive design strategies? So these are some some way of it is a specific way of designing a building in which we try to minimize the use of active strategies, like the use of artificial lighting or the use of artificial means of cooling a space, for example fans, AC. So in vernacular architecture in earlier days it was not electricity was not common as it is today. So the houses were designed in such a way that with respect to these local vernacular architectural style, the climate was in focus. So based on that, the amount of light that has to be entered, the ventilation that has to be allowed, all that was specifically considered in designing the opening, in designing the overall building as a whole. So these were the important factors which were considered, and since there was no electricity in that region, so one has to be dependent on natural light and the natural flow of air in a particular region. So all these were strategically tried to capture in the design, so that the dependency on active means of lighting or air conditioning or cooling is minimized, because electricity was not available. So all these were not in place. So we have to use natural daylight, or we have to allow the air to pass through the space through specific design of openings. If it is hot and dry, then we can't allow direct hot air to enter the structure. So we had to go for some passive means like placing a fountain or a water body, or having a jali or a screen in front of windows and openings. So these are some techniques which were developed based on the climatic region. So that is why these techniques are called passive design strategies, or passive means of cooling or heating a space. So these are some important characteristics of vernacular architecture. So now let us understand how vernacular architecture is linked with climate responsive design principle. As I was explaining you, vernacular architecture includes local climate as one of the important factors in providing some of the strategies for construction. So that is where this climatic responsive design features are developed. So for this, one has to understand the local climate. So climate responsive design begins with analyzing the temperature, humidity, solar radiation, wind direction and rainfall. So if you remember, when you would start with any design project, it may be for architectural design or for any if you have to design a building in any place, so these are some of the important factors that comes to your mind the moment you think of that particular region, isn't it? The temperature. So you have to design a space in such a way that during hot summers somewhere in Nagpur or in Delhi, the temperature, or here in Varanasi, the temperature during summers exceeds 48 degrees Celsius, or sometimes it reaches 50 degree also. So the building that you design should, or the people who will be using that building should be having comfortable space in such extreme climate also. At the same time, during winter, the climate or overall the temperature drops to 5 degree or somewhere to 2 or 1 degree Celsius also. So these are two extreme seasons, and how the building that you design can cope up with such extreme climate along with the citizens, along with the residents who will be using that space. So these are some questions that should come in your mind when you start designing a building for these for the people who are residing in such climatic region. So that is where one has to understand the local climate. Based on that, you can decide on the material that has to be used, the sizes of opening, the orientation of building, and additional other passive features like placing water body, or suggesting some specific landscape elements in the design. So that is why these understanding of these elements are necessary, because only if you understand the local climate, you will be able to suggest some specific materials that can be used in the region. So in this region where you have hot and dry kind of climatic region, so there you can't suggest someone to build using RCC as a material. So with using RCC, the building will heat up very soon. So you have to go for some kind of alternative material other than RCC for construction. So that is the reason why understanding local climate is very necessary. Then next is about the building orientation. Like if your building is oriented properly, so if you are designing a building in some cold and cloudy climatic region or cold and sunny climatic region, so your attempt should be such that to maximize the heat gain in that particular region, contrary to the buildings that you will design in hot and dry climatic region or in warm and humid climatic region. You will be designing in such a way that you minimize the heat gain of the by the structure. So that is where building orientation, either in north south axis or east west axis. So how will you actually design? So if this is north and this is south, and this direction is east and this is south, so based on sun path diagram, so if you must be knowing that how the position of sun changes for the people who are there in the earth, right? So it actually rises from the east and sets in the west, but there is slight tilt of the sun that happens generally in the south direction for people who are residing in northern hemisphere. So there is tilt of sun towards southern direction in during summer months, and in winter it is very slightly inclined somewhere between north and south. So that is there in the orientation side. So that is what has to be considered properly in the design, the orientation. So if you are designing a building in cold and climatic region, so how the building should be aligned, whether it is the building should be in north south axis or in east west axis to maximize heat gain. Try to think about that, and then accordingly you have to orient the building. Then next is about the use of thermal mass. So materials like stone, mud walls can generally have 300 to 450 mm thick. They are generally that thick, 300 to 450 mm thick material. So that helps in stabilizing the indoor temperature fluctuation. So materials which has high thermal mass should be used for construction in such extreme weather. Further, the other aspect that has to be taken care is natural ventilation strategies, like cross ventilation can increase indoor air movement by 0.5 to 1.5 meter per second, improving thermal comfort. So places which are in warm and humid region, so there we have to maximize the airflow in the structure. So if the air is stagnant in an air and there is no movement in hot and humid climatic region or warm and humid climatic region, so one would start feeling discomfort in that region. So to minimize that, it is suggested that you should promote more of cross ventilation, and that can be only provided if you have windows in the opposite direction of the walls. Then next is about shading and solar control, that is if the building has suitable overhangs for if you are designing a building in hot and dry climatic region, so you have to minimize solar heat gain through the design. So the shading of the building has to be done. You have to use buffer spaces like balcony, verandas, all that strategically, so that the direct entry of sunlight, especially from south and west, have to be minimized in such habitable spaces. So you can design washrooms and toilets in such direction through which the sunlight cannot enter the habitable spaces, that is your bedroom, your living room, or your study room. So these rooms will still, since it is not in direct contact with the direct sunlight, so the temperature in those rooms will be much lesser than the rooms where there is direct entry of sunlight, because it is completely impossible for anyone to design the entire building wherein the direct sunlight is not allowed, provided if you design verandas all along the residence. So today, since the availability of land is not such that you can design such verandas all along the buildings or all around the specific building, so that is where these buffer spaces like toilets, balconies have to be designed in these directions, not in the towards the direction from where there is indirect sunlight. So these are some strategies that are applied to minimize solar heat gain in such extreme weather conditions. Then also the other way of making a climate responsive design is by integrating with landscape. So trees and vegetation around the building has a strong role to play in this particular factor. So they can reduce the air temperature by 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. So especially in hot and dry climatic region, you have to go for you have to plant evergreen trees, because these trees will provide shade if your plot is such that your front facing of the building is is towards the south direction. So there is no option at all to to redesign or reorient the building so that you can have an entrance from other direction. So in that case, you have to plant trees in the south direction, preferably evergreen trees, not the deciduous, because deciduous trees shed their leaves during winter. So during winters the solar heat gain may increase in that building. So, to minimize that, evergreen trees are suggested. Similarly, in cold and sunny climatic region or in moderate, you have to go for deciduous trees, because places where there are extreme winters during winter season. So, the plantation of deciduous trees helps in solar heat gain in those areas, because these trees shed their leaves during winters and they allow sunlight to enter the space. So, these are some strategies which you can use in your design and make your design less dependent on active measures, and try to maximize the use of passive design strategies. So, accordingly, let us see that how India is geographically divided into climatic regions. So, overall it is divided into 6 climatic zones, starting with hot and dry, then warm and humid, moderate, cold and cloudy, cold and sunny, and composite. So, majority part of India is located in cold and in composite climatic regions, especially the central India that you see here. So, all these regions in central India are located in composite climatic regions. So, that means the summer is extreme as well as winter is also extreme in these regions. Hot and dry climatic region is limited in the western side, especially in Rajasthan and in parts of areas of Gujarat towards desert areas. Then the moderate climatic regions are located in specific areas only, like somewhere near to Bangalore. That is why the temperature over there is not such extreme during summers, and it is comfortable in winters also. So, similarly the temperature was like this in Pune earlier, but now the temperature or overall the climatic condition over there has changed a lot due to excessive urbanization of the region. Then next is cold and cloudy climatic region. It is seen in some places, especially in Leh and Ladakh, Srinagar, and in parts of Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh, and here in Sikkim and in upper parts of especially here bordering of Assam and West Bengal. So, Darjeeling, Sikkim and all these regions, and here Shillong. So, all these are under cold and cloudy climatic region, and cold and sunny climatic region is seen throughout in Leh and Ladakh and in some regions of northeast. So, there we can see these climatic regions. And then the other is warm and humid climatic region, which is seen in coastal areas. So, all these coastal areas here, even here Tripura and all, we see the prevalence, and in the northeast also. So, all these regions are in warm and humid climatic region. So, the temperature over there during summer is not that extreme, but the humidity is a main concern over there. So, the design has to be such that there is maximum cross ventilation or air circulation is promoted in the buildings. So, now we will focus on each of these locations in detail, each of these climatic zones in detail, and understand the design strategies. So, let us first focus on design strategies for cold and cloudy climatic regions. So, in cold and cloudy, the design should be in compact build form. Buildings are designed with compact shapes, so it minimizes heat loss. So, the more compact building you design, the heat loss will also be minimal over there. So, that is what it is suggested. Then small window openings. So, the opening should not be huge in size that it allows sunlight to escape. So, smaller windows reduces heat loss while allowing daylight to enter. So, that has to be followed. The next is insulated walls and roofs. So, thick stone or mud walls of 400 to 600 mm helps in retaining indoor warmth. So, that is why the buildings that are built in cold and cloudy climatic region, they use stone as a very common building material. Low roof height, that is ceiling heights in these buildings are also very less. In general, we follow the practice of having minimum 3 meter ceiling height, but in the vernacular houses of these regions you will find ceiling height somewhere between 2.1 to 2.4 meter. Dark colored surfaces because it absorbs more solar radiations, helping to maintain warmer interiors. So that is followed over there. Then wind protection, buildings are sheltered with vegetation or walls to reduce cold winds. So that is also followed in cold and cloudy climatic region. So the specific example that is often quoted in designing a building in cold and cloudy climatic region is Kath Kuni architecture, that is seen in Himachal Pradesh, but the design is also it differs to what we see in Shillong and in other cold and cloudy climatic region. So this vernacular architecture, although it belongs to cold and cloudy climatic region, but it is very common in Himachal Pradesh. So walls, so the typical characteristic, the section of the building is somewhat, it is like this. The walls are made with 400 to 600 mm thick material. Multi-layered wall system improves insulation and thermal mass. So they have this pitch roof which allows easy removal or easy flow of water and snow from the roof. If it had been a flat roof here, so all the water and snow will be collected and then they will be channelized through drains, but then there will be a chance of leakage over here or it will create seepage. So to avoid all that, the roof that is designed is a sloping roof in the design. So that is why in hills you will find such architectural style very common with sloping roof at the top. Roofs are insulated using wood, slate or compacted earth layers. So that is, these areas are also called as attics. They are mostly sometimes filled with these kind of insulating material, or they are also used as storage spaces, so that the heat doesn't escape very quickly, nor the cool air that passes in the structure very easily. So that is what it is added. And then the roof height is also minimized, just 2.1 to 2.4 meter. The floor to roof height is maintained. Though there are small openings, that is 10 to 15% of wall area is only used to design the openings. So here what they do is they use alternative layers of timber and stone. So if this is a layer of timber, then 2 to 3 layers of stone is added. Then again the layer of timber is added, then 2 to 3 layers of stone, small stones. These are kind of chips that are added. So like this, somewhat like this. So these are added over here, and then after adding 2 to 3 layers like this, and then on top you have the layer of timber. So like that is why it is called as Kath Kuni architecture. And then kettles are placed at the base so that they allow the heat that is generated from these animals or domestic animals is further allowed to enter the structure, and then it will heat these spaces. So these are some local vernacular design principles which are followed in Kath Kuni architecture. Also you will find these similar techniques being used in buildings in northeast region where it is elevated one. So there the structure that is built are on stilt. So you will find some stilt like this which are built on the ground, and then the entire house is built on top. And then somewhere here you will find the prevalence of pitch roof, and here these low spaces, these act for multiple purposes. The first I explained you in previous slides is about that since these, especially in northeast, there is too much of rainfall and it leads to chances of flooding if it is not properly drained. So that is why what happens is that the water that is collected in floods, since it is elevated, so it will not affect the people who are residing over there. Or the other reason is these reptiles that are very common over there, so they are also not allowed to enter directly. Had this entire building being built in the ground, so then reptiles like snakes and other insects or other animals can enter the building very easily. So to avoid that, these design strategies are followed. Further, they would keep their domestic animals like cattle, which include the cattle, the domestic cattle, so they are all tied and kept here at the base. So the heat that is generated from these cattle would help in keeping this above space warm during winter season. So these are followed in extreme climatic regions, and you see these houses very common in especially in high altitude areas of Arunachal Pradesh and in Nagaland. So these are common houses, design houses over there. So the design strategies that can be extracted from here is that the building is south facing orientation, large windows on sun facing side, thermal mass materials like stone, adobe blocks and brick are used, use of sun spaces or verandas like solariums are to be added in the design, some kind of greenhouse to trap sunlight as much as possible. The next is the proper insulation of roof and wall is added. They either use storm wall, which are very thick earth walls built to minimize the solar, to minimize the dissipation of heat from interior to exterior spaces. Then protection from cold winds by strategically planting vegetations in and around the site. So this is a specific case study which you can explore and understand the traditional houses that are built in Spiti Valley. So these follows the same practices like having small window sizes, and windows are generally oriented towards south direction so that there is maximum solar gain that is possible. So these all houses, so most of the houses are also placed in the southern side of the mountain, so they are not built in the northern side. So most of these buildings you will find to be inclined or to be oriented towards southern direction. The next is about moderate climate. So balanced building orientation is followed. Buildings are oriented to capture breeze while avoiding excessive sunlight. Medium sized openings are designed. Windows and doors allow natural ventilation and it allows daylight. So dependency on mechanical means to light and ventilate for ventilation of the space is minimized. Courtyards are added because it helps in natural ventilation and reduce the indoor temperature. Further, shaded outdoor spaces like verandas and balconies provide comfortable semi-open spaces. So that is all, that also helps in enhancing the thermal comfort. Then lightweight construction materials are used along with vegetation and landscaping to improve air circulation in the space. So the case study of this type of architecture for especially for moderate climate is, I quoted you example before, it is from Bangalore, where many buildings, the traditional buildings that you can understand that how the traditional houses in Bangalore are designed. So some of these examples are here. So low rise spaced housing allows airflow and reduces heat built up. So there are internal courtyard that are designed to maximize light and ventilation. Houses oriented to capture prevailing southwest winds. So as per the windrows diagram, you have to determine from where the prevalent wind is flowing, and then accordingly the houses are designed. Then next is its relevance for low cost sustainable housing. So use of local materials like transportation cost and construction expenses, so all these are minimized because of the use of local material. Further, the reduced energy consumption, that is passive design, reduces the dependency on mechanical cooling and heating. The affordable construction techniques, that is possible because of the use of local material. Environmental sustainability, again, since these methods are purely designed with low environmental impact, so the environment is also focused or kept in mind while designing the building. cultural identity and acceptance, since these architectural styles have become an identity of the region. So, if I show you Bhunga house, you can easily recall that from where this house belongs to, and if I show you any Katkuni architecture, you can easily recall that it is somewhere from Himachal Pradesh. Likewise, stilt houses, you can recall that it is somewhere from northeast region. So, these are some specific architectural style which has now become an identity of the entire region. Adaptation for modern housing. So, some of these principles can also be integrated with modern techniques, and then it can be explored on how we can minimize the cost of construction. So, overall, to conclude from this presentation, we understood that the vernacular architecture actually reflects traditional knowledge developed through interaction with the environment. So, over time there has been lot of studies done by our ancestors, and then these techniques are evolved over a period of time. Climate responsive design ensures comfort while minimizing the energy use. Different climate require specific building design strategies. So, accordingly the climate has to be understood before we start planning for that project. Case studies have shown that practical applications of climate responsive architecture in the buildings. Vernacular principles also help in reducing the construction cost and environmental impact. So, vernacular architecture has to be studied if you are trying to minimize the cost of the construction. Only then you will be using some passive features in design, and then using passive features the cost of the construction also is minimized. So, these approaches remain relevant for sustainable and affordable housing projects in India and also in other regions of the world. So, these are some wrap up activities that are suggested. You can complete this, and if you have any question or if you are unable to solve them, so put this in the discussion forum, or during live session we will try to address these questions. So, in our next presentation I will focus on hot and humid climatic regions, so that is hot and dry as well as warm and humid climatic region, and also composite climate, to understand the vernacular architecture style and some design strategies that are common in these regions. These are resources and which you can explore for better understanding of the topic. And with this I would like to conclude my presentation, and I hope the topics that were covered were very much helpful for you to understand the details about vernacular architecture, and also some design strategies that you can follow in specific climatic regions like cold and cloudy, cold and sunny, and the moderate climatic region. So, thank you for your patience listening.